That was a separate motion, and that, I requested to have him added, not as a defendant for requesting public records, but as a defendant to sit alongside CareSync, not as a defendant to sit alongside Mr. Samuels and myself. And the reason is that because, and without getting into to argue the legal part, is they requested a confidentiality in February, confidentiality with the IDA on the classified project that was announced on July the 16th, which was completely kept from the public in the IDA board, in which they were the recipient of a $2 million grant from the IDA that only a very few people knew about. All of this took place in complete secrecy and complete confidentiality, in which there was absolutely no confusion or conflict between Florida statutes or 288 or anything else on the part of a very few people in the IDA, primarily the defendants here. All of that took place. The reasons given, the announcement given, the award given within 20 to 30 minutes at that IDA meeting on the 16th of July. Subsequent to that, a public records request, once the announcement was made, for information that happened prior to that, which should be allowed once the announcement has been made. What happened to, where was the application and all the feasibility and everything that happened that led up to this award. It should be public information. There was blanket confidentiality, which is a repeated pattern of behavior on all of these projects. All of the projects follow this pattern of behavior, which is blanket secrecy where these deals are done. And then exactly identical to the CareSync experience. So when this happened, at the same time that the examination report, that the public records request that we made for the CareSync records, the grand jury presented, all of this stuff is going on. Florida Hospital was in negotiations for this $2 million grant for any purpose. All of this stuff's going on with the IDA that led up to everything that we know about, with the undercover agent going in to the IDA in April, that led to the April 16th letters to Mr. Lambert and Mr. Evers, that led to the April the 28th lawsuit that named us as a defendant, the April the 21st letter from Mr. Putterbauer claiming confidentiality once again for Mr. Bond. All of the stuff that happened. Florida Hospital was over here doing the exact same thing. Over here, there was no conflicts at all. Rock solid letter, February the 25th, from Mr. Eric Stevens, claiming 288.075 confidentiality, Florida Hospital, under Operation Crocodile. Everything is secret. No one knew anything about that operation at all until July the 16th. They weren't even on the agenda for the meeting. They just walked in and sat at the table.
Mr. Coleman, let me interrupt, because I have no personal or professional opinion on that, honestly, but I am not the Florida legislature. I am not the IDA. I don't pass the statutes that create the statutory exemption that you refer to. I'm not the super administrator of the IDA or the county commission. My role is limited to adjudicating the matters within circuit court jurisdiction. Now, all of what you've talked to is a matter of great and important public interest. The use and benefit of the expenditure of public monies. No issue about that. And I think accurate to say, generally, most people want to make up their own minds. They don't want someone to tell them what happened. They want to see what happened, and they'll make their own minds up. But you're into an area that is like legislative, executive, how decisions should be made at the IDA, whether the IDA is complying with the law, whether the statutory exemption, whether someone should make a claim under a statutory exemption for information. Those are all matters that come pre-formed to me. I don't make, and cannot, or should not make, executive legislative decisions for the county commission, the IDA. I don't pass the statutes. My role, again, is limited to adjudicating those matters that are within my jurisdiction as a circuit court judge to adjudicate. So, it's appropriate to characterize concerns as appropriate or reasonable. What's the benefit of the expenditure of public money to the community? And show us how it's benefiting. But those aren't adjudicatory issues before me in this case. I would be reaching far outside this courtroom as a judge to assume that type of jurisdiction. I do not have it as a judge.
I'm asking that if dual track, if at the same time this case is, the run-up to this case is going on, everything that happened running up to this case we're having right now, at the same time, Florida Hospital is following a dual track, and they're tracking exactly at the same time, and then at a certain point in time, the IDA gets themselves in an undercover investigation over here on CareSync, and at the same time, Florida Hospital sitting right next to it. It just doesn't happen to get on the radar. They just didn't know about it. It hadn't hit yet. It didn't hit until July the 16th. It was sitting right here. It could have hit that one too. I'm saying that at this point, now that it's on the radar, these defendants, they should be defendants too, sitting right on top. And at those records too, because the ruling should apply across the board, because this agency, they're replicating this process that they use, this MO that they use is replicated over and over. It's a cookie cutter process that they use.
This case will resolve in the manner that it resolves, and may have implications for the parties at other times and in other circumstances. But that doesn't mean that in this case, I move all of the IDA's process under judicial review and scrutiny. That would make the circuit court basically operating the industrial development authority. And that I have no jurisdiction. Circuit court has no jurisdiction to do that. Let me give another example. You've used fly heavies. You retired. When you're piloting that aircraft, who's the pilot in command?
Captain.
And if you're the captain, you're flying left seat, who is responsible for that aircraft?
Captain.
exclusively, who makes the ultimate decisions regarding the safe operation of that aircraft,
Captain.
including the management and control of all staff and passengers, correct?
Captain.
Is that ever overridden from the ground?
No.
When you're given a heading and altitude in positive control, who makes that decision? The captain or ground?
Ultimately, the captain.
And once approved, you follow the course provided, absent emergency or approved change of course and altitude. But it's always, since you're responsible, you always can take last-minute action.
Correct.
But in a wider scope, does the captain promulgate the rules applicable to the operation of aircraft?
Yes.
The pilot? Does the pilot promulgate the Federal Aviation Administration rules for the operation of aircraft?
Yes.
The pilot does? Who makes the rules for how an aircraft will be operated?
Oh, the FAA.
Does a pilot get to override the FAA?
No.
This isn't a completely seamless overlay, but I hope it explains. For this case, I'm the pilot in command. I decide within the appropriate exercise of discretion, just like with motions that were addressed earlier today, how the case goes forward, and then specific decisions at the time and within the scope of my authority to make them. But I don't rewrite, and I can't ignore the statutes, rules of judicial administration that are applicable to them. So I think if I try to extend the analogy any further, it'll get sloppy. But I hope that emphasizes, for your point of view, essentially, I'm the pilot in command with respect to the conduct and progress of the case. I don't make the law. My responsibility is to do my best to know what it is and to rule appropriately, and not to rule on things that aren't before me. So, again, about really, I hope in summary, what you've said is unquestionably a matter of important public interest and discussion. No issue about that. There are very different views on that in this community, no doubt. But the issues in this case are extremely limited. And I'll give it one broader context. It's actually a good thing that judges are limited to deciding the specific matters of law before them, because none of us want judges deciding more than they should decide. Where would we all be if judges assume, I think you're all thinking now, either individually or some time in your history where you think, well, a judge really overstepped his or her bounds. But appropriate judging is judging restricted to the matters before you for which you have jurisdiction, doing what you're supposed to do, no more than you have jurisdiction to do. And again, to say in some way that what happens here, I'm going to do as an overlay to the other projects that you mentioned, is just, my arms aren't that long as a judge. I can't get there.
Thank you, Your Honor.
On that discussion, those motions, there's not a legal